My name is Elizabeth Carson. I'm 27 years old, and I live or used to live in a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. People around here like to say, it's the kind of place where nothing bad ever happens, but that's a lie. Some things just happen behind closed doors. My story started like so many others in a house full of silence and denial. I was curled up on the cold tile of our downstairs bathroom floor, my ribs screaming with every breath when I heard my mother's voice just outside the door. Keep quiet, you'll ruin his future. Her tone wasn't panicked. It wasn't even angry, just cold. Like this was an inconvenience, like I was the problem. That was the moment I realized I didn't have a family. I had an audience, witnesses who watched me break and chose to look away. I had always been the quiet one, the good daughter, the helper, the one who never argued, never caused trouble. I thought that maybe if I did everything right, they'd see me, love me, but I was wrong. My brother Jason was 24, a rising basketball star with a powerful arm and a temper that could shatter glass. My parents, Richard and Diane Carson, treated him like a golden ticket. Everything in our house revolved around Jason's practices, Jason's games, and Jason's potential draft into the big leagues. Meanwhile, I had a second thought. The invisible one who did the dishes, folded the laundry, and kept her mouth shut. I moved back into my parents' house 6 months ago, after my apartment lease ended. I told myself it was temporary, just until I saved enough for a down payment on a condo. But deep down, a small part of me still hoped that coming home meant belonging. That was a lie, too. The house was more like a museum of Jason's ego. His trophies lined the mantel where my childhood photos used to sit. His protein-packed groceries dominated the fridge while I reheated leftovers. At the dinner table, Dad recited Jason's stats like scripture, and Mom fussed over his training schedule like she was managing an Olympic hopeful. I was just there. I noticed the warning signs. I wasn't naive. The way Jason's moods shifted like lightning. The dents in his bedroom walls from a baseball, he'd claim, though we both knew better. I saw how his girlfriend Madison stopped coming around her eyes, hollow her voice tight. And still, I said nothing. Because in our house, silence was loyalty. Speaking up was betrayal. That Saturday night changed everything. Jason had a big game. It didn't go well. He came home hours later reeking of beer and frustration. I was in the kitchen wiping down the counters trying to disappear into the wallpaper. "What are you looking at?" he barked, dropping his gym bag with a loud thud. "Nothing," I replied, stepping back. "I was just cleaning up." He yanked open the fridge, grabbed another beer, and slammed the door. "Coach is a moron. Whole season's a joke." I tried to soothe him. That was always my role, wasn't it? "It's just one game, Jason. You'll bounce back." I even forced a little smile. "That was my mistake," he snapped. His hand gripped the front of my shirt, yanking me forward. Before I could scream, he shoved me hard into the granite countertop. The corner struck my ribcage with a sickening thud, and all the air left my lungs. I crumpled. The tile was freezing against my cheek. My vision tunneled. Then came the kick. A sharp, deliberate kick, right where I'd hit the counter. The crack echoed inside me like a bell. And then nothing. I must have blacked out. When I opened my eyes again, I was still on the floor. Every breath stabbed like a knife. My mother was crouched beside me, not checking my face or my wounds, just listening for Dad's car. "Elizabeth," she whispered sharply. "You need to get up. Your father's coming." I can't breathe," I gasped. She looked at me then. Not with worry, not with love, but with fear. Fear for him. "Listen to me," she said. "You tripped, you hit the counter. That's the story. Say it, you know how sensitive he is. This could ruin his shot at the league. He broke me." And she was already rehearsing the cover-up. Somehow, inch by agonizing inch, I crawled to the downstairs bathroom and locked the door. I slumped to the floor, shaking. Outside, I heard their voices, my father's deep grumble, my mother's frantic whispers. Jason's bedroom door slammed upstairs. He went to sleep. Then her voice, soft but sharp, pierced the silence. Keep quiet. You'll ruin his future. The next morning, the pain was unbearable. I couldn't stand straight. Breathing felt like drowning. Dad didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just said, "Get in the car." On the drive to urgent care, he never looked at me, just stared ahead at the road. "You fell down the stairs," he said. "Not a question. A command. That's what you're going to tell them." I nodded. I didn't have the energy to argue. I didn't even have tears. Just the numb obedience of a daughter who'd been trained to keep the peace at all costs. At the clinic, I gave the nurse the script. I fell down the stairs. The words tasted like ash, but someone was about to see through the lie. Her name was Dr. Melissa Trent. She walked into the exam room with quiet confidence, a clipboard in one hand and a gentle, perceptive look in her eyes. Her sandy blonde hair was tied back in a low twist, her scrubs neatly pressed. But what struck me most was how she looked at me, not through me, not past me. At me. She glanced at the chart, then at my face. "Elizabeth Wright," I nodded. "Mind if I take a look?" I muttered. "Go ahead," trying to brace myself. When her fingers gently pressed on my side, a cry escaped my lips before I could stop it. I bit down hard on the inside of my cheek, trying not to sob. Her hands paused. "I need to get some x-rays," she said softly. "But before I do, I want to ask something. And I want the truth." I stared at her. "This kind of bruising," she said, voice lowered. "It doesn't look like a fall. Did someone do this to you?" My heart seized. I could feel the weight of my father's warning, my mother's pleading, Jason's rage, all pressing on my chest harder than the broken ribs. I froze. I didn't speak. I didn't nod. But I didn't lie either. She didn't push. She just said, "Okay," and stepped out to arrange the scan. While I waited, I stared at the pale blue wall, the medical posters, the dull hum of fluorescent lights. I thought about the truth. What good was it? My parents didn't want it. They wanted silence. They wanted peace. Not healing control. The x-rays showed it all. 3 fractured ribs. One nearly broke through. Dr. Trent returned to the room, the films in her hand. She clipped them to the light box on the wall and pointed gently at the jagged lines. "These injuries," she said, voice careful, but unwavering, "aren't consistent with a fall. They required blunt, focused force. More than one strike." She turned to me. "I'm going to ask again." I looked down, then up. My voice cracked as I whispered it. "My brother." It was the first time I'd ever said it out loud, and saying it felt like betrayal, like treason, but also relief. I burst into tears, ugly, gasping sobs. "Please, don't tell anyone," I begged. "It'll ruin everything. He'll lose everything." Dr. Trent's face didn't harden. It didn't go cold, but it didn't bend either. "Elizabeth," she said firmly, "he broke your ribs. That matters." I sniffled, wiping my face with trembling fingers. "But my parents, they'll hate me. They already do. And the League Scouts, he's been training for this his whole life. He just lost control. That's all." She shook her head. "Number. You didn't ruin anything." "He did." She paused, her tone shifting gently. "I'm a mandated reporter. It's not a choice. I have to file a report. Because you're living in the same house where this happened, that makes it a matter of personal safety. It will go to Child Protective Services and law enforcement." I felt the world tilt under me. It wasn't mine to keep quiet anymore. By the time my father drove me home, the wheels were already turning. A police cruiser was parked out front, lights off but unmistakable. I could feel his grip on the steering wheel tighten. He didn't speak, but I could almost hear him grinding his molars. Inside, chaos was beginning. Jason was brought in for questioning. My mother's face turned pale as milk. "What did you do?" she screamed, as if I had just set fire to the living room. My father's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. "I told you," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "I told you to shut your damn mouth." I flinched, but I wasn't listening anymore. While they shouted, while they stewed in their panic, I walked past them, into the guest room I'd been staying in. I grabbed the suitcase I had never fully unpacked, and I started folding my clothes. Slowly, calmly. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I would sleep that night, but I knew I wasn't staying there. That house wasn't my home. That night, Dr. Trent called me personally. "There's a local women's shelter network," she said. "They're full right now, but I found you a spot in a subsidized apartment program on the west side." I said yes. I didn't even ask for details. I just knew I needed out. The place was tiny. One room, creaky floors, and secondhand everything. But it had a lock on the door. No footsteps stomping down the hall. No shouts. No gaslighting. And most of all, no Jason. I called the shelter's helpline that night and cried into the phone for almost an hour. I talked to a volunteer named Tamika, who just listened. She didn't offer advice. She didn't say he didn't mean it. She didn't say family is family. She just said, "You're not crazy, and you're not alone." That was the first night in years I didn't wake up with tears in my eyes. The next day, I filed for a restraining order. Standing in the courthouse lobby, my fingers shook as I filled out the paperwork. My voice cracked every time I had to say assault or injury. But I did it. And for once, I didn't feel like the bad guy. My family. They started the calls immediately. Voicemails from my mother crying, "You're destroying your brother's life." "Why are you doing this?" Text messages from my father. "Don't bother coming back. You're cut off." Even a text from Jason, just one sentence. "You always were jealous." I blocked them all. And it was hard, because no matter how broken they made me, they were still my family. And a small, tattered part of me still wanted them to call and say, "We were wrong. We're sorry." But they never did. I wish I could say that after I left, everything got better. That life opened up like a sunrise and never looked back. But healing isn't linear. It's jagged, messy. Some nights I still curled up in the corner of that tiny apartment, clutching my ribs even though they had mostly healed. Phantom pain, my doctor said. But it wasn't just in my bones, it lived in my memories. Still, I had something now I'd never had before. Distance. And silence. The good kind. The kind where no one was yelling through walls or gaslighting you into rewriting your own story. Dr. Trent didn't disappear after the report. She checked on me regularly, always asking if I needed anything resources help with court paperwork referrals. She connected me with a pro bono attorney named Sarah Whitaker, who specialized in domestic violence cases. Sarah was sharp, efficient, and fierce. When we first sat down together in a little conference room inside the legal aid building, she asked me what I wanted. I hesitated. My parents had always taught me not to want anything, just to endure. "Justice," I finally whispered. She nodded. "Then let's get to work." We filed a civil suit against Jason, not just for my hospital bills, but also for emotional and physical damages. Sarah explained that while the criminal investigation ran its course, the civil process could begin in tandem. "You deserve more than medical attention," she told me. "You deserve acknowledgement." It was the first time I felt like someone believed my pain mattered. Word of the lawsuit traveled fast. The basketball league Jason had been training for his holy grail caught wind of it. His draft status was put under review, his training suspended indefinitely. He spiraled, according to what little I heard from mutual acquaintances. Moved back in with my parents. Showed up drunk to a scrimmage. Missed conditioning appointments. That had nothing to do with me. That was his own doing. Meanwhile, I started therapy. At first, I didn't know what to say. I sat across from a soft-spoken counselor named Marcy, unsure of where to begin. The assault. The years before it, the silence. She handed me a small card on the first day with two printed words, "You matter." I carried that card in my wallet for months. We talked about everything. The broken ribs, yes, but also the slow, invisible pain of never being chosen. Of hearing your father talk about your brother like he was the family's future and you were just furniture. Of watching your mother's eyes glaze over when you asked for help. Grief doesn't just come when someone dies, it comes when love disappears. When you realize the people who raised you never really saw you. Marcy helped me name those losses, and then slowly she helped me plant new seeds in their place. It was during one of those therapy sessions, weeks after the court filing, months after the incident, that an idea sparked. We had been discussing safety. How I'd never felt truly safe, not even as a child. How I had wished for a room to go to, where no one yelled, where no one threw things, where I could just be myself. And suddenly I said it out loud. What if I created that room for someone else? That's how The Quiet Should Speak was born. It started as a daydream, then scribbled a plan in my notebook. Then, through a combination of stubbornness and late nights at the public library, a grant proposal. I applied for a small community grant funded by a local outreach program. I wrote pages about my vision, an after-school program for girls in high-risk households where they could do homework, talk to counselors, eat a warm meal, or just sit in silence if that's what they needed. A place where no one told them to get over it. A space where their truth wasn't inconvenient. A month later, I got the call. "Congratulations," the program officer said. "Your proposal's been approved." I remember standing in my little apartment barefoot and stunned, holding my phone like it was made of glass. I sank to the floor and laughed through my tears. I had built something. Me. Not Jason. Not for Jason. For me. The grant helped secure a shared space in a local library's community room 3 days a week. We had beanbags and art supplies, a part-time counselor, and donated books lining the wall. But most importantly, we had girls, real girls who showed up, who spoke in soft voices, who sometimes didn't speak at all. And I listened. I didn't tell them everything about my past, but I told them enough. Enough so they'd know I understood. I still had nightmares sometimes. Still jumped at loud noises. Still walked faster when I passed a car that looked like Jason's. But every time I unlocked the door to our little program room and heard a girl laugh or watched one of them help another with a math worksheet, something inside me mended. And then came the fundraiser. It had been almost a year since the attack. We decided to hold a small event at the downtown library auditorium to raise funds and awareness for our expanding program. Parents, donors, teachers, community workers, we invited everyone. I had prepared a short speech, just a few words about why I started the program, who it was for, and what we hope to grow into. I wore a navy dress I'd bought at Goodwill and borrowed heels from a neighbor. I stood behind the podium, the lights warm on my face, scanning the audience with gratitude. I took a breath and began. Thank you for being here tonight. This space, these walls mean more than just support. They represent voices that were once silent, including mine. That's when the doors at the back slammed open. A familiar silhouette filled the space. Jason. Jason's presence sucked the air out of the auditorium. He stood in the doorway, his face gaunt, his once bulky frame, thinned, but his eyes, those eyes still burned with the same dark fire. I didn't have to see his fists to know they were clenched. I didn't need to hear a word to recognize the storm coming. He pointed at me across the rows of startled guests. "You," he shouted. "You did this. You ruined my life." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Chairs creaked as people turned. Some parents instinctively shielded their children. Others stood uncertain what to do. Security began moving from the sides, but I raised one hand just slightly. I didn't want to panic. I didn't want this to turn into something worse. My heart slammed against my rib cage, those same ribs he had fractured. My mouth went dry. For a second, I was 17 again, watching him smash a remote against the wall because dinner was late. I was 21 hiding in my car after he'd thrown my phone out the window, but then another memory replaced those. A girl named Destiny, sitting cross-legged in our program room last week, showed another girl how to fold an origami crane. Miss Liz, she'd said to me, "Do you think I'll be brave one day like you?" That memory steadied me. I looked out at the faces in the room, my volunteers, the young girls, the community donors. This was no longer his stage. It was mine. I set my note cards down gently on the podium. I walked down the steps of the platform and stood in the center aisle, the lights casting a soft glow around me. I turned toward Jason, but I didn't speak to him. Not first. Instead, I turned to the audience and said, "This is the man who broke my ribs." A silence fell so sharp and complete, it felt like the entire room had stopped breathing. I let it hang there, the truth finally out in the open. Then I turned fully to face Jason. "And this," I said, my voice unwavering, "is the family who told me to stay quiet." Security reached him then. He tried to shake them off, sputtering, "It was a fall. She lied. She always lies." But even his voice sounded hollow, desperate. The rage he carried didn't land the same way anymore. They escorted him out. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and the room stayed still. For a moment, no one moved. Then one woman, one of the donors, I think, stood and began to clap. Another followed. Then the entire auditorium joined in. Not wild applause, not a standing ovation, just quiet, steady, powerful support. I walked back to the podium and finished my speech. I don't even remember exactly what I said. I just know it came from someplace deeper than I'd ever reached before. I spoke about dignity, about healing, about how breaking a cycle starts not with revenge but with honesty. Afterward, a group of young girls surrounded me, hugging me with small arms and big hearts. One of them, a shy fifth grader named Kelsey, whispered, "I told my aunt about what my uncle did." I blinked back tears and hugged her tighter. Later that night, as I sat on the edge of my bed in my apartment, I thought about how far I had come. Less than a year ago, I was lying on the cold tile floor, wondering if I would ever breathe without pain again. Now I was breathing. Jason's life didn't fall apart because I spoke up. It unraveled because of what he did and what he refused to take responsibility for. As for my parents, I never heard from them again. Not really. A distant cousin told me they still believed I had embarrassed the family, that I took things too far, but I wasn't waiting for their version of closure anymore. I was creating my own. With the lawsuit slowly moving through court and my civil protections in place, I had more room to think, to grow, to dream. We got another grant, hired a full-time counselor. We moved into a larger space across from a school that welcomed us with open arms. I started writing 2 essays and small blog posts under a pen name. I wrote about survival, about sisterhood, about what it means to find your voice in a family that taught you to whisper. One post went viral. A nonprofit in Chicago reached out asking if I'd speak at their youth conference. I said yes, because I had something to say now, and I wasn't afraid to say it. I kept Dr. Trent updated too. Sent her photos of our center, a little update. One day she wrote back, "Proud of you, Elizabeth. You reminded me why I do this work. There are still hard days, but they don't define me, and neither does he." The seasons changed. From one spring to the next, my little one-room sanctuary for hurting girls had grown into something I barely recognized, but in the best way. Now we had 2 full-time staff members, a quiet room with soft lighting for girls who needed space, and even a weekend book club run by one of our volunteers. We had a name people recognized. Local teachers referred students to us. Churches donated food. Survivors came back to offer mentorship. But more than anything, we had stories. Shared, trusted, heard. And I had mine. I wasn't just the girl who got hurt anymore. I was the woman who built a shelter with her own hands, word by word, one scar at a time. It was a bright afternoon when the final judgment in my civil suit came in. I didn't go to the courthouse. My attorney Sarah called me with the news. You won, she said. Full damages. Backed by the judge. I exhaled slow and deep. It didn't feel like fireworks or champagne. It felt like a door closing with a soft, satisfying click. Jason wouldn't go to jail. His criminal case was dropped after he entered a court-ordered rehabilitation program and pleaded no contest. But the civil ruling stood. He owed me. And whether or not he ever paid the record of what he did could never be erased. More importantly, I had my record of truth sealed not in court documents, but in every girl who looked at me and saw a safe place. There was one night in early fall, cool air leaves beginning to turn, when I found myself sitting alone on the back steps of our new center. I had just finished locking up. Inside, the lights had all gone out except for the hallway lamp that always flickered softly. I closed my eyes and listened. Not for footsteps, not for shouting, just for quiet. And I smiled. I didn't miss them, my parents. I used to think that made me cold. But now I understand. Some people choose blindness. Some people choose silence. And some people, like Jason, choose destruction. But I chose myself. Weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A handwritten note scrawled in a shaky hand. I didn't mean to. I was under pressure. I was drunk. I lost everything. There was no apology, just excuses. I didn't write back. I burned it. Not out of rage, but release. Forgiveness, I learned, doesn't always mean inviting someone back into your life. Sometimes it's just deciding not to carry their weight anymore. Months passed. Then came the letter that stopped me in my tracks. A little girl named Lila, 9 years old, had been with our program for 4 months. She never talked much, barely above a whisper, but she had kind eyes and loved puzzles. On her last day before moving to a new city, she left me a note folded 3 times. Miss Elizabeth, thank you for listening. I never told anyone what happened before, but I told you, and now I feel stronger. I held that note for a long time. It was the full circle I never knew I needed. All those years I spent silent, hoping someone would ask if I was okay. Now I was that someone, for her, for dozens of others. Jason's voice no longer held power over me. His name was no longer heavy in my mouth. My parents' silence was no longer something I tried to fix. Their loss was no longer my fault. One rainy Saturday, I visited the downtown library again, the place where everything had cracked open. I stood near the podium where I once told a roomful of strangers what had happened to me. I remembered the tremble in my knees, the pounding in my chest. Now I stood still. I looked out at the rows of empty chairs and imagined them full of the people who mattered: the girls, the women, the teachers, the strangers who refused to look away. I'm okay now, I whispered. I am. I don't know what comes next, but I know who I am. I am Elizabeth Carson. I am not broken anymore. I am not quiet anymore. And I am not alone. Elizabeth Carson's story began on the cold tile floor of her parents' house, bruised, breathless, and silenced. Raised in the shadow of her volatile younger brother Jason, she was the dutiful daughter who stayed quiet while her family built their lives around him. But when Jason violently attacked her, and her parents urged her to lie to protect his future, something inside her broke for good. With the help of a perceptive and compassionate doctor, Elizabeth found the strength to speak up for the first time. Her journey wasn't easy. She faced rejection from her parents, threats, guilt, and the terrifying task of starting over with nothing but the truth. But from that pain grew something remarkable: resilience. With legal and emotional support, Elizabeth took action. She pursued justice through the courts, and more profoundly began to heal the wounds left by years of neglect and silence. That healing became a mission. Through her nonprofit, The Quiet Should Speak, Elizabeth created a haven for girls who, like her, had been told to shrink to be silent. Even when Jason reappeared in a final attempt to shame her, Elizabeth stood tall. She reclaimed her voice and in doing so permitted countless others to use theirs. Through court victories, therapy, and community support, she transformed trauma into purpose. In the end, Elizabeth didn't need apologies from the family that failed her. She had built something better, a life of her own, making a place where her voice mattered, and a community that saw her for who she truly was. Her story is a testament to the power of truth and a reminder that no matter how loud the silence may feel, it can always be broken. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard.